They say family protects you. But in the Montgomery household, family was just another word for leverage. Annalise Montgomery learned that lesson the hard way, when her own sisters dragged her to a dungeon door, shoved a bag of silver coins into a killer's hand, and walked away without looking back. She thought she was being sent to clean floors. She didn't know she was being sent to die. But in the deepest, darkest cell of the Thornwood Pack's fortress, something happened that her sisters never saw coming. The most dangerous man in the realm, Alpha King Aurelius himself, caught her scent. And when an Alpha King finds his mate in chains, he doesn't negotiate. He breaks down walls. If you believe no one deserves to be sold by their own blood, hit that subscribe button right now. Only people who think betrayal is acceptable won't. Let's prove loyalty still exists. Subscribe, and let's see how many of us stand against family betrayal. The Montgomery trailer smelled like stale beer, cheap lavender plugins, and desperation. It was a scent Annalise knew better than her own reflection, because she'd spent 20 years scrubbing it out of every surface while her sisters sat pretty, doing their nails and planning their futures. Tonight was no different. Except for the suitcases. Annalise stood frozen in the narrow hallway, staring at the 2 duffel bags sitting by the front door. Her duffel bags. Packed tight, zippers straining. Going somewhere? She asked, her voice steady despite the ice crawling up her spine. Lillian, the eldest, didn't even look up from her phone. She was perched on the sagging couch, legs crossed, blonde hair swept into an effortless ponytail that probably took an hour. We need to talk, Anna. It's Annalise, she corrected quietly. She hated when they shortened her name. It felt like they were chipping pieces off her identity, one syllable at a time. Peyton, the middle sister and the mean one, rolled her eyes. She was standing by the kitchen counter, examining her reflection in a compact mirror. God, you're so dramatic. Just sit down. Annalise didn't sit. She crossed her arms, her worn hoodie sleeve riding up to reveal a faint bruise, yesterday's accident when Peyton had shoved past her in the bathroom. We're in trouble, Lillian finally said, setting her phone down with a sigh that sounded almost rehearsed. Dad's gambling debts caught up. The Thornwood Pack is calling in what he owes. Annalise's stomach dropped. The Thornwood Pack wasn't just another werewolf territory. They were brutal. Ruthless. Their alpha, Elliot, ran underground fight rings and black market trades. Wolves who went to Thornwood rarely came back. How much does he owe? Annalise asked, though part of her didn't want to know. 60,000, Peyton said, snapping her compact shut. Which we don't have. Obviously. Annalise looked at her father, slumped in his recliner, a half-empty bottle of whiskey dangling from his hand. He was conscious, barely, but he wasn't going to help. He never did. So what's the plan? Annalise asked, her voice small. Lillian stood up, smoothing her designer jeans. They were new. Annalise recognized them from the online store Lillian had been obsessing over last week. Funny how there was money for that, but not for Dad's debts. Elliot made us an offer, Lillian said, her tone too casual, too light. He needs workers. Unregistered wolves who won't be missed. He's willing to pay 70,000 for the right person. Unregistered wolves. That was the polite term for werewolves who hadn't shifted by 18 and were considered defective. Non-entities. In a world where your wolf defined your worth, being unregistered meant you were less than human. Annalise was unregistered. You're selling me, she said flatly. Peyton scoffed. Don't be so melodramatic. You're getting a job. We're getting out of debt. Everyone wins. I'm your sister. And we're your family, Lillian shot back, her voice sharp now. We've fed you, housed you, kept you hidden for 20 years. Do you know what it's like explaining why the Montgomery family has a defect? Do you know the shame we've carried? The shame they'd carried. Not her. Never her. Annalise looked at the bags again. When? Tonight, Lillian said. Elliot's people are coming in an hour. Pack whatever you want, but don't try to run. You know you can't outrun a wolf. Annalise felt something crack inside her chest. Not her heart, that had broken years ago. This was something colder. Sharper. I cooked for you, she said quietly. I cleaned for you. I lied to the pack inspectors for you when they asked why I was still here. I did everything you asked. And now we're asking you to do this, Peyton said, grabbing her purse. We're going out. Be ready when they get here. They left. No hug. No apology. Just the slam of the trailer door and the crunch of gravel under expensive boots. Annalise stood in the silence, staring at her father. He finally looked up, his eyes glassy and unfocused. You'll be fine, girl, he slurred. You're tough. She didn't answer. She walked to her tiny room, more of a closet, really, and sat on the edge of her bed. She didn't pack. The bags were already done. Lillian had packed them days ago. Instead, she pulled out the one thing she'd kept hidden, a small leather journal. Inside were sketches. Wolves, mostly. She'd drawn them from memory, from the few times she'd seen the pack gather in the woods. She didn't know why she drew them. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was longing. Maybe it was proof that even without a wolf, she belonged somewhere. An hour later, headlights cut through the dark. A black van rolled up the driveway, its engine a low, threatening purr. The door opened, and a man stepped out. Elliot. He was massive, broad-shouldered, with a scar running from his temple to his jaw. He didn't knock. He walked straight in, his boots heavy on the warped linoleum. This her? He asked, looking at Annalise like she was a used car. Lillian, who had returned just minutes before, nodded. That's her. 20 years old. Quiet. Obedient. She won't cause trouble. Elliot circled Annalise slowly, his nostrils flaring. She doesn't smell like wolf. She's unregistered, Lillian said quickly. But she's strong. She can work. Elliot grunted. He pulled an envelope from his jacket and tossed it onto the coffee table. 70 grand. Count it. Lillian's hands trembled as she tore it open. She counted fast, her lips moving silently. When she finished, she looked up, relief flooding her face. It's all here. Good. Elliot grabbed Annalise's arm, his grip bruising. Let's go. Wait, Annalise's voice broke. She looked at Lillian, at Peyton, standing by the door like sentries. Please. Don't do this. Lillian looked away. Peyton checked her nails. And Annalise realized, in that moment, that she had never mattered to them. Not really. She was a burden. A stain. And now, she was a transaction. Elliot dragged her to the van. She didn't fight. What was the point? As the door slammed shut and the van pulled away, Annalise looked out the tinted window. She saw Lillian standing in the doorway, silhouetted by the light, counting the money one more time. And she made herself a promise. If she survived this, she would never beg again. If you think selling your own sister for cash is disgusting, smash that like button. If you believe Lillian and Peyton deserve what's coming, drop a comment saying justice is coming. Let's see how many of us stand against betrayal. Only people like Lillian won't engage. The drive to Thornwood territory took 4 hours. Annalise spent them in the dark, her wrists zip-tied, her mind racing. She tried to remember everything she'd heard about Elliot's pack. They were mercenaries. Fighters. They didn't follow the old laws. If you were weak, you didn't last. When the van finally stopped, she was hauled out into a courtyard surrounded by high stone walls. Torches flickered in iron sconces, casting jagged shadows. The air smelled like smoke, wet stone, and blood. "Take her to the lower cells," Elliot ordered, his voice echoing off the walls. "Put her with the others." "The dungeon?" one of his men asked, surprised. "I thought she was for kitchen duty." Elliot's smile was cold. "She lied about something. I can smell it. Until I figure out what, she stays locked up." Annalise's heart hammered. She hadn't lied. She hadn't done anything. But it didn't matter. They dragged her through a maze of stone corridors, down spiraling stairs that seemed to go on forever. The air grew colder, damper. She could hear dripping water, distant moans, the rattle of chains. Finally, they stopped in front of a heavy iron door. One of the guards unlocked it, and they shoved her inside. The cell was tiny. Stone walls, stone floor, a single barred window near the ceiling that let in a sliver of moonlight. There was a bucket in the corner and a thin, moldy blanket. That was it. The door clanged shut. Annalise sank to the floor, her hands still tied. She tried to breathe, tried to think. But the walls felt like they were closing in. She'd survived 20 years of neglect, of abuse, of being invisible. But this? This was different. This was a tomb. Hours passed. Or maybe minutes. Time felt meaningless in the dark. Then she heard it. Footsteps. Not the heavy boots of Elliot's guards. These were different. Purposeful. Powerful. Annalise scrambled to her feet, pressing herself against the back wall. The footsteps stopped outside her cell. A voice, low and lethal, cut through the silence. "Open it." "My lord, this is a high-security wing." "I said open it." There was the scrape of metal, the groan of hinges. And then the door swung wide. A man stepped into the cell. No. Not a man. An alpha. He was tall, easily 6'4", with broad shoulders and a presence that sucked the air out of the room. His hair was dark, almost black, and his eyes, God, his eyes, were molten gold, glowing faintly in the dim light. He wore a tailored black coat, dark pants, and boots that looked like they cost more than the entire Montgomery trailer. But it wasn't his clothes that made Annalise's breath catch. It was the way he looked at her. Like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. "You," he breathed, his voice rough. He took a step forward, and Annalise shrank back. "Please," she whispered. "I didn't do anything wrong." He stopped, his jaw clenching. "Who put you here?" "Elliot. He bought me from my family." The temperature in the cell dropped. The man's eyes flared brighter, and a low, dangerous sound rumbled in his chest. "Aurelius," one of the guards said nervously from the doorway. "We didn't know she was." Silence. Aurelius. The name hit Annalise like a shockwave. Aurelius Thorncrown. The Alpha King. The most powerful wolf in the realm. He was here. In her cell. Aurelius crouched down, bringing himself to her level. Up close, she could see the sharp lines of his face, the faint scar on his jaw, the way his hands trembled slightly, like he was barely holding himself back. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice softer now. "Annalise," she managed. "Annalise." He repeated it like a prayer. "How long have you been here?" "A few hours." His eyes darkened. "And before that?" I was sold." The words hung in the air. Aurelius stood slowly, turning to face the guards. His voice, when he spoke, was a blade. "Where is Elliot?" "In the main hall, sire." "Get him. Now." The guards fled. Aurelius turned back to Annalise. He pulled a knife from his belt, and she flinched, but he just cut the zip ties from her wrists. "Can you stand?" he asked. She nodded, though her legs felt like water. He offered her his hand. She stared at it. His palm was broad, calloused, but the gesture was gentle. Slowly, she took it. The moment their skin touched, something snapped into place. It was like a golden thread had been pulled taut between them, vibrating with energy. Annalise gasped, her knees buckling, but Aurelius caught her, steadying her. "I know," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "I feel it too." What is this?" she whispered. "The mate bond." Annalise's mind reeled. Mate bonds were legend. Fate. They were supposed to be rare, sacred. And they only happened between wolves. "I'm not a wolf," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm defective." Aurelius's expression softened. He reached up, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You're not defective, Annalise. You're mine." If you're rooting for Annalise and can't stand what Elliot did, drop a comment saying she deserves better. Hit subscribe if you think people who sell others are scum. Let's show the algorithm that loyalty matters. Only heartless people like Elliot won't engage. Elliot arrived in the dungeon corridor minutes later, flanked by two of his enforcers. He looked annoyed, not afraid, until he saw Aurelius standing in the open cell, his arm wrapped protectively around Annalise. "Your Majesty," Elliot said, forcing a smile. "I didn't know you were touring the lower levels." "You bought her." Aurelius's voice was flat, devoid of emotion. That made it more terrifying. Elliot's smile faltered. Yes. A standard labor contract. Her family signed off. Everything's legal." "Legal," Aurelius repeated. He took a step forward, and Elliot instinctively backed up. "You locked my mate in a dungeon and called it legal." The word mate sent a ripple through the corridor. The guards exchanged glances. Elliot went pale. I didn't know." "You didn't ask." Aurelius's eyes blazed. "How much did you pay?" 70,000. Aurelius pulled a checkbook from his coat pocket. He scribbled something, tore out the check, and let it flutter to the ground at Elliot's feet. 200,000. That covers the debt, the insult, and your continued existence. Take it and consider yourself fortunate I don't tear your throat out where you stand." Elliot stared at the check, then at Aurelius, then at Annalise. Greed warred with fear. Finally, he bent down, snatched up the check, and stuffed it into his pocket. "She's all yours, Your Majesty." "She was always mine." Aurelius turned to Annalise, his expression softening. "Come. We're leaving." Annalise hesitated. Everything was happening too fast. An hour ago, she was in a cell, certain she'd die there. Now a king was claiming her as his mate. "I don't understand," she said quietly. Why me? Aurelius cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing her cheek. Because the bond doesn't lie, Annalise. It chose you. And so do I. He lifted her into his arms, bridal style, and carried her out of the dungeon. Annalise buried her face in his coat, inhaling his scent, cedarwood, smoke, and something wild. It calmed her racing heart. As they ascended the stairs, she caught a glimpse of Elliot watching them, his face twisted with resentment. But he didn't move. He didn't dare. Outside, a convoy of black SUVs waited. Aurelius placed Annalise gently in the back seat of the lead vehicle, then slid in beside her. The door shut, and the convoy rolled out, leaving Thornwood and its horrors behind. For the first time in hours, Annalise could breathe. "Where are we going?" she asked. "The Obsidian Keep," Aurelius said. "My home." "You're home now." "I can't be your mate," she blurted. "I'm not a wolf. I never shifted. My family said I was broken." Aurelius's jaw tightened. "Your family is wrong. But Annalise." He took her hand, his grip firm but gentle. "I don't care if you never shift. I don't care if you're unregistered. You are my mate. That means you're the most important person in my world. Nothing else matters." Tears pricked her eyes. No one had ever said anything like that to her. No one had ever looked at her like she mattered. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I know." He pulled her closer, letting her rest her head on his shoulder. "But you're safe now. I promise you, no one will ever hurt you again. If you believe Annalise deserves a real family, hit that like button. Comment she's finally safe if you're glad she's out of that dungeon. Subscribe if you think Aurelius is the king we all need. Only cold-hearted people like Lillian and Peyton won't engage. The Obsidian Keep was breathtaking. Built into a cliffside overlooking the sea, it was all dark stone, glass, and elegance. Annalise had never seen anything like it. Aurelius carried her inside, ignoring the staff who bowed as they passed. He took her straight to a suite in the east wing, a massive bedroom with floor-to-ceiling windows, a four-poster bed, and a bathroom that was bigger than her old room. "Rest," he said gently. "I'll have the doctor come see you." "I'm fine," Annalise protested, though she was exhausted. "Humor me." An hour later, Dr. Elena Voss arrived, a stern woman with silver-streaked hair and sharp eyes. She examined Annalise thoroughly, heart rate, reflexes, blood pressure. Then she frowned. "When did you last shift?" Elena asked. "I never did." Elena's frown deepened. She drew a vial of blood, then ran it through a portable analyzer. Minutes later, the machine beeped. Elena stared at the results, her expression darkening. "Your Majesty," she called. Aurelius entered immediately. "What is it?" Elena held up the printout. "She's been poisoned." The room went silent. "What?" Annalise whispered. "Wolfsbane, silver nitrate, and nightshade root," Elena said, her voice tight with anger. "It's a suppressant cocktail. It's designed to keep a wolf dormant. If administered over years, it would prevent shifting entirely." Annalise felt the floor tilt. "No. That's not possible. My sisters gave me vitamins. They said I was sick." "They lied," Aurelius said, his voice like thunder. "They poisoned you." "But why?" Elena looked at the results again. "Nightshade root is only used on alphas. It's too potent for regular wolves, it would kill them in days. The only reason you survived is because your wolf is incredibly powerful." Annalise shook her head. That doesn't make sense. I'm nothing. You're an alpha bloodline, Elena said firmly. Possibly even a white wolf. The room went silent. White wolves were legend. They appeared once every few centuries, pure, powerful, and revered. They were symbols of balance, of justice. My sisters knew, Annalise said slowly, the pieces clicking together. They knew what I was, and they poisoned me to keep me weak. Aurelius's hands clenched into fists. His eyes blazed gold, and the air around him crackled with barely restrained fury. We're going to fix this, he said. Elena, start the detox. Sire, the detox will be painful. I don't care. Do it. The next 3 days were hell. Annalise's body rejected the poison violently. She burned with fever, her skin turning clammy, her veins glowing faintly black as the toxins were purged. She screamed, thrashed, begged for it to stop. Aurelius never left her side. He held her hand, wiped her forehead, whispered reassurances. When she clawed at him, drawing blood, he didn't flinch. When she sobbed that she wanted to die, he held her tighter. You're stronger than this, he murmured. Fight, Annalise. Fight for me. On the third night, the fever broke. Annalise woke to find Aurelius slumped in a chair beside her bed, his head resting on the mattress, his hand still holding hers. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, stubble on his jaw, his shirt wrinkled. He'd stayed. Annalise reached out, brushing his hair gently. He stirred, his eyes snapping open, instantly alert. You're awake, he said, his voice rough with relief. You stayed, she whispered. Of course I stayed. He lifted her hand, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. You're my mate. Where else would I be? Annalise felt something shift inside her, not the poison, but something deeper. A connection. A bond. And beneath it, stirring for the first time, she felt her. Her wolf. If you think Lillian and Peyton deserve to pay for poisoning their own sister, drop a comment saying they betrayed her. Hit subscribe if you believe Annalise is going to rise stronger. Let's show that real strength comes from surviving. Only toxic people like her sisters won't engage. 3 weeks later, the Obsidian Keep was preparing for the High Council's quarterly assembly. Alphas from across the realm would attend, including, unfortunately, Elliot. Annalise had recovered, but she still felt different. Stronger. More aware. Her senses were sharper, her reflexes faster. And at night, she heard a voice in her mind. Soon, it whispered. Soon, I'll be free. Aurelius had been busy with council preparations, but he made time for her every day. They walked the cliffside paths, shared meals, talked late into the night. He told her about his childhood, about the burden of the crown. She told him about her sketches, her secret dreams of belonging. Slowly, she began to trust him. To love him. But there was one shadow hanging over them, Lady Serena Kane, daughter of the Western Alpha. She'd been positioning herself as Aurelius's future queen for years. And she wasn't happy about being displaced. The night before the assembly, Serena confronted Annalise in the library. You're the mate, Serena said, her voice dripping with disdain. The charity case. Annalise set down her book. I'm sorry you're upset. Upset? Serena laughed. Darling, I'm insulted. You're not even a wolf. You're a broken little human playing dress-up. I'm leaving, Annalise said, standing. Serena blocked her path. He'll tire of you. And when he does, I'll be there to pick up the pieces. Before Annalise could respond, a low growl echoed through the library. Aurelius stepped out of the shadows, his eyes blazing. "Serena," he said coldly. "Leave. Now." Serena's confidence cracked. She fled. Aurelius turned to Annalise, his expression softening. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," she said, though her hands trembled. He pulled her into his arms. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone, Annalise. You're my mate. That's all that matters." The High Council assembly began the next morning. The great hall was packed with alphas, their auras clashing like storms. Annalise sat beside Aurelius on the dais, feeling small and exposed. Then Elliot stood. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice carrying across the hall. "I have concerns about the legitimacy of your mate bond." The room went silent. "Explain," Aurelius said, his voice deadly calm. "She's unregistered. Unshifted. How do we know she's truly your mate? For all we know, this is a political ploy." "Enough." Aurelius stood, his presence filling the hall. "I don't owe you an explanation, Elliot. But I'll give you one anyway. Annalise is my mate. The bond is real. And if you question it again, I'll—" A detonation cut him off. The stained glass windows shattered inward. Smoke filled the hall. Ropes descended, and mercenaries swung in, hired by Elliot for one purpose: to kill Annalise. Aurelius shifted instantly, transforming into a massive black wolf. He leaped in front of Annalise, snarling. But there were too many. A mercenary circled around, aiming for Annalise. She froze, terror locking her limbs. Then she heard it. "Fight." The voice wasn't hers. It was her wolf. "Fight for him. Fight for us." Heat exploded in Annalise's chest. Her bones cracked, reshaped. Pain and power surged through her in equal measure. She closed her eyes and let go. A blinding white light filled the hall, so bright that the mercenaries shielded their eyes. When it faded, standing where Annalise had been was a wolf. Not just any wolf. A white wolf, massive, radiant, glowing with ancient power. The hall went silent. Elliot stared, his face pale. Impossible. The white wolf, Annalise, threw her head back and held. The sound shattered the remaining glass, sent the mercenaries scrambling, and dropped every wolf in the hall to their knees. Except Aurelius. He stood beside her, his black fur stark against her white. Together, they moved through the chaos like a storm. When the last mercenary fled and the smoke cleared, Annalise stood in the center of the hall, her chest heaving. Aurelius shifted back, pulling her into his arms as she returned to human form. "You're magnificent," he whispered. Annalise looked at the bowing alphas, at Elliot cowering in the corner. And she smiled. If you're cheering for Annalise right now, smash that like button. Comment White Wolf Queen if you think she just proved everyone wrong. Subscribe if you believe in underdogs who rise. Only jealous people like Serena won't engage. The trial was swift. Elliot was charged with treason, attempted murder, and illegal trafficking. The evidence was overwhelming. The High Council voted unanimously: exile to the Shadowlands, a lawless wasteland where rogues and outcasts fought for survival. But Annalise had one more matter to settle. She requested that Lillian and Peyton be summoned to the keep. Aurelius warned her. "You don't have to face them." "I do," she said. "They need to see what they tried to destroy." Her sisters arrived 2 days later, escorted by the royal guard. They looked smaller than Annalise remembered. Lillian's designer clothes were rumpled. Peyton's nails were chipped. They were led into the throne room, where Annalise sat beside Aurelius. She wore a gown of white silk, her hair crowned with silver. She looked every inch a queen. Lillian gasped. "Annalise?" "Your Majesty," Annalise corrected. Peyton's face twisted. "This is insane." "You're not." "I'm the White Wolf," Annalise said calmly. "The mate of the Alpha King. And you poisoned me for 10 years. Lillian's face went pale. "We didn't know." "You knew exactly what you were doing." Annalise stood. "You kept me weak because you feared what I'd become. You sold me because I was inconvenient. But you made one mistake." "What?" Lillian whispered. "You underestimated me." Annalise descended the steps, stopping in front of her sisters. "I could execute you. I could send you to the Shadowlands. But I won't." Lillian sagged with relief. "You'll live," Annalise continued. "But as I did. Unregistered. Powerless. Stripped of your names, your status, your wealth. You'll work for your survival, just like you made me do." "No," Peyton begged. "Please. Take them," Aurelius ordered. As the guards led them away, Lillian looked back, tears streaming down her face. Annalise felt nothing. 1 year later, the Obsidian Keep was alive with celebration. The annual Moon Festival drew wolves from across the realm, all gathered to honor the White Wolf Queen and her king. Annalise stood on the balcony, watching the bonfires below. She felt Aurelius's arms wrap around her waist. "Happy?" he murmured. "Mostly," she admitted. "The orphanage opened last week. The new laws protecting unregistered wolves are working. But there's still so much to do." "And you'll do it," Aurelius said. "Because you're you." She turned in his arms, smiling. "The council asked about heirs again." "They always do." "What do you think?" Aurelius's eyes gleamed. "I think I'd love to see little white wolves running through these halls." Annalise laughed, pulling him close. "One day. But for now, I want to enjoy this. Us. Our kingdom." "Our kingdom," he agreed, kissing her softly. Below, the wolves howled, celebrating their queen. And Annalise, who had once been nothing, smiled. She was finally home. That's the story of Annalise, from dungeon prisoner to White Wolf Queen. If you loved seeing her rise and her sisters fall, hit that like button. Comment your favorite moment below. And subscribe if you believe in second chances and real justice. Let's build a community that stands against betrayal. Thanks for being here. Now go watch the next story, because we've got more powerful queens rising from the ashes.